Thank you for tuning in to Quality Violence Cinema. I'm Christian,
I'm Bones.
and we have here today the legendary Ron Bonk. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, he's done about a dozen films or so, and founder and runner of the SRS. So
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it's an honor to
Sorry.
have you, man. I'm glad you came on.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me.
your technical first film, just to kind of get into it, is called What a Deal. Can you kind of get
Oh, yeah.
that?
That was like an instructional video on the antique business. I had wanted to jump right into my first feature, but back then I was working in the antique business. That was like my job. I was working. It was like the family business, and so I was going down to Florida with my father. And I just bought my camera, SVHS camera, wanted to shoot something. So he had written this book about the antique business that he would sell like at the shows and stuff. So I took that and I made a movie version. And there's some little acting moments in it too. A lot of it's just coverage at these antique and flea market. But there was some stuff that I scripted out, so it was kind of like doing a movie in a sense. And then when I got back, I jumped right into my first movie, which was City of the Vampires.
Oh
Is it
yeah.
considered like lost media right now, or can you get that?
Oh, you can get both.
I mean, the What the Deal.
What a deal! I still have copies kicking around on DVD. I mean, it's the subject matter. Some of it's still relevant, but a lot of it's out of date. City of the Vampires is out on our retro line DVD.
Yeah, I
So,
have that. Mm.
Yeah, I would love to see What a Deal because I love antiquing. It's actually a huge
oh, sure.
it's a huge hobby of mine. So your father's book, was it like appraisal? What he actually write about?
It was specifically called "What a Deal: Buying and Selling at an Antique Flea Market or Antique Market" or something like that. So it was both advice on how to like to run around the markets and look for deals and best time to find deals, tips in terms of like selling your stuff. So like the one of the tips might have been for buying was to be out super early when the dealers are unpacking as opposed to trying to show up a couple hours later. And a tip for selling might have been like to change your price tags and lower your stuff every so often because dirty price tags would make people think that the item had been for sale for a while and wasn't worth what you're asking for it. So it was like things like that.
Yeah, like business strategy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is it still in print, by the way? Or do you
Yeah, like I said,
have a couple
I
copies?
haven't. I got the old release on DVD still kicking around out there, and I
Oh,
don't know when we last rerun it, but some of it's out of date because there's like this is pre-cell phone, so there's nothing like on cell phone. I haven't set up an antique market in I don't know how long. It was well reviewed at the time. I remember it got this great review from a publication called the Library Journal. So the libraries would comb these different like trade magazines, I guess you could call them, to see what was out there, what they could buy. And this got this good review. And then shortly after that, I started getting these faxes or mail, letters of POs. I remember some coming in like this, I had like one of those like dot matrix printers with the strips on the side you would tear off. And I remember the orders would be coming that way. And I'd get like whole chains, around the country for like some city in Ohio or some town in, I don't know, Nebraska or something that would order 10 copies or 50 copies or 3 copies. And then suddenly I had to make all these units and mail them off and invoice them. And so it was fun and it was interesting and it gave me my first taste of distribution.
Is that what made you start making films? Is kind of the success that you had with What a Deal?
No, I mean I wanted to make movies before that. It was more like I made that because I was working with selling antiques over the winter down in Florida. I was like, well, I'll shoot this video at the same time so I could be behind a camera and stuff. But if I had had my choice, I would have gone right into a motion picture production. But I had already committed to like the 6 months down in Florida. It was interesting. I remember a lot of people would be paranoid when I'd set up the video camera. There was all, I don't know if it's true nowadays, but there was all these couples and single people who were living, say, on the edges of society, maybe weren't filing taxes or claiming very low taxes, or they could have been hiding from the law. So I know I'd get people mad that I was taping them. Set up the camera up on top of my father's truck because he had like this roof rack for loading like furniture on. It was a van. I'd go up there and set it up, and I'd get all sorts of like people looking up or coming over and asking, or if I asked them if I could tape their booth, they'd be like, "Hey, no, I don't want a camera anywhere near my table. What are you doing?" So yeah, it was funny. Eventually reached a point where, and I guess this goes with like guerrilla filmmaking, where I would try to secretly tape them and not really show their faces, because I wasn't getting releases in most cases. So I might go, behind some trees and point the camera in their direction. There was a pretty big camera. It was a JVC 707U, if I remember right. And that was one of the huge ones. It was the C tape, so it was a little smaller, more compact, but still, it wasn't like these tiny little video cameras. Today, it was pretty long, I don't know, a couple foot and a half long, with a big lens on it and stuff. But I would tape them from like the side, and then I would use the footage that didn't necessarily show their faces, and it'd be very compressed footage because I was zooming in from far away. So there'd be a crowd there that would partially block stuff. And it was just, I needed a lot of footage to kind of fill in the narration, which was all from the book. So it's just a lot of random footage of people shopping and buying, and close-ups of table merchandise or that sort of stuff.
So what's the comparison of your cameras from your old work versus now? Like, what was your phases of upgrading?
I mean, I started off with a SVHS camera. There was two that I was using. The JVC would always end up breaking down in some form on set, so I had a Panasonic backup that I didn't like as much picture quality wise. They were both rough. The old days, like the video cameras would have like the mics off to the side for some reason. Like this one had like this little rubber attachment mount that the mic was on, and I would try to run external mic to it, so I'd have a cord plugged into it. And the cord itself would be so heavy, it'd kind of pull the mic down, and eventually on set, that weight would end up tearing the rubber and the whole thing would get torn off. So I wasn't recording the audio separate, but I was at least micing it. So I had those two, and then the Panasonic was a full size. Then I did, for Strawberry States, I upgraded to a digital 8 camera. And I remember instantly being so impressed by like the colors. Like I think we had like a red light on set the first time I used it, and I was just like, wow, the red looks amazing, because red always bleeds so much in analog video. So even though I would have it sometimes on set, it was because you just felt like you needed it for the scene. It always, when you'd start editing and it would drop down a few generations, it would become so muddy, and it was like coloring outside the lines. So the digital 8 was so much sharper, and it was nice. And then let me see, after that, I went to one of the HDV, I think it was, where it used the 8mm tape, so to record a digital signal to it. So I used that for clay, and that was another upgrade. Still didn't quite look like film, but it was, again, sharper. It was HD. And then finally, I think with Miss Cannibal Holocaust, and that was my first one that I shot HD on. I forget the camera we used. It was a big one. And then been doing HD. I have a Sony 4K camera now that I use. If it was a bigger project, a bigger budget, I'd maybe do like a Red or something like that. But this works fine for like the shorts that I'm doing now. But even like, I did a short called Gangnam Style for the High 8 anthology, and part of the deal with that was you had to shoot on analog. So I actually dug out the HD 8mm camera, but shot it SD format for that. So I had a better camera itself, like with better lenses and stuff, but it was still an SD format, and it was all edited digitally, so it didn't lose any like there's no generation loss. So so if the project asks for it, I might do a different type camera, but I'm pretty happy with the 4Ks for now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your segment in High 8 because I watched it about a year ago when I like first interviewed Marcus Cook. And looking on your IMDb, I was trying to figure out which one you did. And as soon as I heard the name, I knew exactly which one you did. It's so much fun.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Usually I get a lot of good comments for that one. And it was a fun one to shoot. I viewed it as like, if I had more talent at the time, it would have been the movie. I was trying to transport myself back to that time. So this would have been the short I would have shot. I would have shot something that was influenced by my favorite horror movies or action movies right around that time. Once I hit on the concept I was going to do with it, it was like the third draft. It was originally my idea for like a comedy sketch, for like a Saturday Night Live comedy sketch. And so I was doing something kind of different with my short. And I wasn't loving where the first two were going. And then at the third draft, I was like, well, what if I use this idea, this action character? No matter how hard he tries, he's come across the unrescuable group. And then it just like came right out of me, and it was like perfect, and I loved it. And as I was writing it, I had written in a couple of lines that were like homages, like famous lines from other horror movies, other movies in general. And then I started like populating almost like every other sentence to be from another movie, these famous quotes, but said in different ways, under different context. And yeah, it just turned out to be fun. It was a fun script. It was a fun shoot. It was definitely one of the better productions. They're all fun. They've all been great for the most part, but that one was definitely up there in top few.
Well, I definitely think it was the most clever as well, because like you said, like it's a pure action star, like that would be in a completely different fucking movie, but
Yeah.
nothing in the movie changes. It's just a straight horror movie, so the action star can't be the star. Like,
Yeah. And no one cooperates with him.
Yeah.
He can't save everyone just by pure will, like everyone's dying around him. And then I also addressed, like, with a lot of these zombie movies, prior to that short, I hadn't seen any of that. Maybe 28 Days Later, I take back, but you people get splattered with tons of blood and not get infected, they get in their face, their eyes and stuff. Walking Dead seems to address this a little bit, where the characters got sick from it, but it was just funny how easy or how hard it was to spread this virus that was overtaking the world. So, any little blood contact that hits, like I said, like a mouth or, some sort of opening, turn the people into a zombie.
Like coughing zombies, just zombies just going around coughing on people. They're like,
Yeah.
I
The
think
reality
about
is,
that all the time.
it could be that easy to spread, in somebody's story or in real life. We went through a pandemic, so we know. But yeah, it was funny how many movies didn't ever confront that contradiction.
It's surprisingly very, very fucking few, like you said. What got you into the type of films that you like to make? Because you usually do like a throwback, either grindhouse, SOV style. What was the first instance that got you into that?
I mean, I grew up loving horror movies, so it made sense to make horror movies. It also helped that, when you're working this low budget, that you don't need name actors in horror movies to be able to sell them. It's the one genre that people will buy even if they don't know anybody in the movie. Pretty much any other genre, you want to have some sort of name star or it just won't sell. So they kind of went hand in hand. But I mean, I just grew up on horror movies and loved them so much. And the stories that I would make up in my own head were either horror or sci-fi. Those are my two favorite, and they still remain my two favorite. And then within the horror genre, of course, there's a lot of subgenres. You mentioned like Grindhouse. I did a Grindhouse movie like with She Kills, Grindhouse style, I guess you could call it. Exploitation style, and I had a lot of fun doing it. Maybe I'd do another one in that style eventually. Sometimes they sell. As far as a distributor standpoint, I don't do them as much because they can be a tougher sell because there's so many of them, and the bigger stores and stuff don't necessarily want them. Like they want like monster movies. We do a lot of shark movies, obviously. Those are always real popular, and I can sell them around the world.
I fucking love shark movies, and it is crazy how fucking huge they are in markets. Like, you could see 20 of them in Walmart a month. It is insane.
And yours definitely stand out, and because there's tons of them, but it's the sense of humor, it's the gore, it's the whole approach to it. I mean, your one-liners just crack me up. Like some of the stuff that just comes out. Like I remember, like
in House Shark, you talking about?
Yeah, the House Shark especially, but even the Vicious Sweet. Like just the whole like I'm gonna make you come till it hurts, type attitude.
The lines for the last couple of pictures, including the ones that I just wrote and produced, have definitely been crazier and over the top. With the shorts I've been doing more recently, I've steered away from that a little bit because I didn't want to get too pigeonholed in that area, and I found it a little more challenging because you can get away with a lot of stuff when you have those super campy movies. Like with She Kills, I would use the mistakes. In House Shark, we could have a cornball moment, but they're always so much fun to write, and I have some of the scripts. I was writing scripts over the pandemic, and they were a mixture. Some were very serious and some were, more comical. And one of the ones I wrote, and I don't want to reveal too much detail yet on it, but it definitely was cut from the same cloth as like She Kills or those type of B movies, I guess you could say, that I've made or produced, with a lot of great funny lines and moments and over the top
You get the inspiration for these comical moments. Do you just get drunk and high with yourself and just figure out?
No, I don't do that. I think it's just from watching so many of these movies and appreciating the bad moments. It's funny how many times like a movie will get watched and say derided and not appreciated and not loved, and then it'll develop this love from the fans later who will embrace it for its badness. But for me, a lot of these movies, I mean, I fell into the same category years ago where first it was, this movie's crap, but they would stick with me. Like lines would stick with me, and you'd find yourself repeating the lines to like friends and stuff like that. And so at some point, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, or maybe longer, I started being like, I love these movies from the start. And so those things would stick with me. I'd find myself laughing out loud at something that was meant to be serious, but came out so bad in the movie. And I would also see, like, if I was watching with other people, how they would then react to me like, oh, yeah, that is kind of funny. But anyway, so those moments just sort of stuck with me. I guess it's been my sense of humor, but it's also sort of amplified my sense of humor, the exposure to those. So
Yeah.
they sort of like worked hand in hand, where
Happened
now
too.
it just sort of happened. You think of a moment and you think of like, well, what would be a different way to approach this moment? What would make it like super funny? What would be the way to approach this that wouldn't be the standard? I don't have a good example, but it would say
Well,
like, you know,
Well, like 1,000 references to all the
yeah.
old movies, you can easily tap into like certain moments and get inspiration from them, you know.
Well,
sure. But
the
you can even
best
take
the best example of that though is actually in House Shark, because I've recommended that movie to so many people, and my favorite moment of that movie is so stupidly clever and ridiculous, where the babysitter goes in to take a shit and she strips all of her clothes off
yeah.
to take a shit.
Yeah, I
And
needed a nude scene. I was like, well, why not? And that actually came from kind of a true story, because everyone does go like, why did
what?
she take her clothes off? Yeah, I remember my brother telling me about his friend getting like a stomach ache, and he was, sitting on the toilet and he was sweating so bad like he took all his clothes off. And I just thought it was like such a funny thing to have in a movie. So when like and so at the beginning of House Shark, I was like, how can I get some, nudity in this? Plus, the girl at the beginning of Jaws strips and runs into the woods. I was like, well, should this have her strip and go to the bathroom? Why not? And I've actually seen people post about that. Like if someone asked or made a comment about, they'll be like, oh, I actually do that, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of funny, that people who have appreciated have revealed. I guess that's common for them. I guess it's not so well known. It's not something I personally do, but apparently some people do. Yeah, House Shark. I mean, I took a lot of moments that you would think would be played, like Frank in the tent. He could have just had this argument with his wife, but instead I had him like break down sobbing like a baby, and then have like snot running out of his
Oh, I
nose
love
and
that
stuff.
scene.
Instead
That's
of
so
like, how could you play that moment different? Like that's not made the best example of me doing it, but because eventually I should have had him wipe the snot. Maybe it went on too long, but those sort of moments, like a person
Yeah.
can be grocery shopping and it can be saying, oh, he just goes and picks up some food and walks out. That's what everyone does in every movie. What can make that scene funnier or unique? Maybe there's a
Well,
mime in the aisle, who's
I think that's what makes your films so unique, is because, like you said, you do focus on the distribution side, like, because shark movies are doing great, so you made a shark movie, but you
sure.
do so much clever shit that no matter what, at least those scenes are going to be remembered. So your film stands out way above like
Oh,
fucking like Deep Blue Sea 2 or 3 that had a shitload higher budget than you did.
oh,
Like House
Sharknado.
Shark is
Yeah.
way up there.
well, it does. I mean, even when people hate the movie, they do tend to remember the moments of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they remember these moments, I feel like, like a year or whatever down the line, they'll remember that moment and they'll start laughing about it. And then it'll actually make them, where they hated the movie before, they'll actually start to like it or build a fondness for it or revisit it or recommend it to friends.
Yeah, or
And
they
then
find
just,
themselves using those one-liners.
yeah, exactly. And it keeps it going along. In that respect, it's a tactic that works well, for the movies and works well for, even like I said, if initially they're just like, oh, this movie is horrible.
I think that's the statement of a good filmmaker, is like, it doesn't matter what you feel when it comes out, it matters how long the impact lasts. Like if it's a lasting impact, that means you did your job well. Like,
Yeah, I think it's important to build a legacy. I mean, that's one of the things I've tried to do with SRS Cinema and have to some degree already. My catalog is combed through my old catalogs. Movies are reacquired, or people, fans will seek them out just to be able to see them, or they'll pay big money for them, like on eBay or from other collectors just to own them. But continuing it forward, you got to constantly evolve and change if you're going to survive as a distributor and a filmmaker. So again, the movies I'll pick up will add to that legacy because I'll pick up something, say, super weird like Pappy's Graveyard, and it's just bizarre and insane, and probably no other distributor would release it. But once I've released it and some of these hardcore fans have discovered it and they talk about it, then it might get another distributor who's doing something similar go, one day down the line, maybe when it's out of print or maybe sooner, I don't know. They'll go, oh, I remember hearing about that movie. I remember watching this movie and it was super crazy, and I would have never picked it up back in the day, but it's now kind of built this cult status, and now I'll pick it up. And that's happened with a lot of my old movies that I've released.
I think it's the thing where, like, if a movie doesn't do well and it becomes out of print and there's so few releases and they go for so much money, the other distributors realize how much money it's going for, so they think that there's a bigger audience than there is, so they'll put it out. So it still works in a way.
Some of these companies, I mean, they can release anything and they're going to have this sort of core base, which I rely on too. So I have this core base that'll buy so many units of it, and mine will kind of, maybe like a Vinegar Syndrome maybe is guaranteed, I don't know, 400, 500 units of everything they release, regardless of what it is. Where me, if it's a standard sort of movie that I'm known for, it's guaranteed maybe selling 200-300. But if it's not, if it's something more on the fringe like Armageddon, it might only sell 50 to 100 units ever, maybe only 50 units. So I'll do only a 50 unit run on them. But again, it sort of leaves it out there for people to, if they don't discover it when I released it, to discover it later and appreciate it. If I find something redeeming in the movie itself, I will often release it if we can work out a deal with the filmmaker, because I want to be able to say it came out through SRS, and I want to be able for them to be able to say, hey, my movie got released and people saw it and maybe it became something more.
So just as clarification, like, what defines a unit? Is that like single copies, or is that like
single copy selling? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
On physical media. I'm talking about physical media. So a lot of movies pick up and do maybe this limited run on Blu-ray. First, I'll do these releases, sort of these boutique versions via the company direct, which is Blu-ray, occasionally VHS, even though I've gotten away from it. It's just too much of a hassle. Occasionally DVD, but there'll be like Blu-rays that can be, like I said, 50 units up to 2,000 units, will sell direct from SRS and fulfilled to the fan base. And those are all just, like I said, single unit physical media. But some titles I'll pick up for more, and it may be just putting them out on a wide VOD digital basis. And it may also be putting them out on a wide DVD as well. So VOD right now is doing better for me than DVD. DVD is still viable and wide release, but there's just not, unless it's like a big monster movie or something like that, it really just doesn't get much in terms of shelf space.
Has that changed since the whole thing you signed with getting more distribution, like Walmart and things like that?
I mean, it changed for me years ago. I mean, I've had movies. I think House Shark was my first one to get in Walmart, which was, I don't know how many years ago. We were always getting listed on like Walmart.com, but they actually get shelf space is a different deal, and it's different.
So doesn't Walmart only pick up select titles? They don't actually just pick up companies?
Everything doesn't go through there. So they like the monster movies. Like, we've been able to get a number of the kaiju movies into Walmart, but a title like Devil Times 2, which we did a limited Blu-ray release for, it's coming out on DVD via my Nightmare Fuel line. That'll never get into Walmart because it doesn't have enough of a hook for them, and it doesn't have any stars. So it's got to have like one or the other. And
it's got to be a ripoff or have a movie star in it.
Well, it's got to be not so much even a ripoff. It just has to have like a big concept.
Yeah, the selling point.
It could be sharks, or it could be kaiju, or it could be a giant mutated rat, or whatever it is. It's got to have something going for it that Walmart goes, our buyers want this. If it's a specific genre, because it's such a big order for them, and the shelf space there is so limited that they want to make sure it moves too. So a movie like Devil Times 2, it's this like homage to 70s like TV horror movies. It has a fan base, but it doesn't have enough of a fan base. So it'll get on Walmart.com, which is run by, I believe, Ingram, but it won't get on the Walmart shelves because they're not going to think they can move 18,000 units, which is the minimum order for them, or even half of that. Yeah, you have to run 18,000 units for them, and usually they sell and the initial push out like 9 to 10,000. It could range. You could get up closer to 15,000. Sometimes it does real well. It could get back in there. Like House Shark got back in there during the pandemic, and then they even ordered more, and so did I think Rigo and Raga. If it's not going to sell that many units, if it's not going to sell say at least half of those, then it could they don't want it. And some titles do go in there. Now it hasn't happened with me, but I've heard horror stories where say they placed an 18,000 unit order and they only sold 3, 4, 5,000 units. The filmmaker or the distributor might have broken even. I would have to break the economics of it to see if I thought they did, but that leaves so many units to sell off, and most likely they've broken even if at best. That doesn't work for anybody.
If that happens, do they give the units back to you and you have to give them the money back for those units?
Well, they don't. They only pay for what sells. They also hit you with a series of fees, like a PLLC fee, which is, I believe, part of the advertising and part of the storage. They hit you with shipping fees to get it there. So it costs a whole bunch of money just to get it in there. And then whatever doesn't sell after about 8 weeks, I think it's 8 weeks, pretty much exactly. They may have been 6, but I think it's 8. They take all the units and sell, and they ship it back to you. And then some of the stores will kind of like units will linger with them for a while, so you'll get a series of smaller returns after a while. But you don't have to pay back those returns. You only have to pay back for what's returned physically and they paid you for. So the units that initially come back, not necessarily a deduction from your bank account, but it is, say, 5,000 units that you have to restore and get rid of. I personally don't want them to end up in a landfill. I don't want to contribute to the plastic. So usually then we try, sometimes you can put them back through Walmart, like into their $5 bins, but sometimes you have to just try to get them like into the dollar stores at like pennies on the unit. But at least this way, they're not getting thrown out, at least right away.
So, like, if Walmart ordered 15,000 units of like House Shark and they only sold 10,000, but you still have to pay to make those 50,000 units to send to them, right? So you're not getting
18,000 minimum, and that's $13,000 approximately to run. Yeah.
So
it's a big investment. Yeah, it's a big investment.
You're not seeing any return until they sell them. You're just giving them the shit, basically. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes like with the Walmart deals, it'll like erase any profits coming for a few months from. You always got to go through like an aggregator for these sort of deals. Like the bigger companies, they don't want a bunch of small accounts, so they make you go to one account who then handles all the small accounts. So if the aggregator owes you money, it might get wiped out because they'll usually put up the expense of running the units for you. And they're not going to put up that money for the units if they don't think it's going to sell in Walmart too. So they'll talk to Walmart. They'll be like, I have this title, like I have House Shark. I think it'd be really good on your shelf. Walmart will either agree or disagree. If Walmart disagrees, they're not going to run it. But if they both agree, then they'll be like, okay, we're going to need that 18,000 unit minimum orders, 13,000. We'll pay that and we'll take it from the sales that we get back from Walmart. Everyone's dipping into the money a little bit too, so that reduces it as well. And then Walmart doesn't even start paying you until after the 8 weeks are over because they're, I think, net 60.
It sounds like since you're going through the aggregator, though, that they eat up some of the initial first cost, so it's not like too much of a huge burden on you yourself when you get it in there.
True. I mean, it's you are at the mercy of whatever prices they're saying stuff costs. So if if you'd shopped around and shipped directly to them, you could do it cheaper, but it's usually just easier to say to them, handle everything. I just want to be hands off and collect my money for it. And they handle all the logistics. If units are coming back, they're going to handle the storage of it. If money's getting charged back, they're just going to deduct it, for returns or whatever. They're just going to deduct it from other money that they owe you. You're paying them for it, but they're worth the cost usually.
So what's the initial reason for starting SRS Cinema?
Well, after What a Deal, I'd made City of the Vampires. There was only 2 companies I knew about that were doing SOV releases, and one of them had like a horrible reputation. The other one didn't have much better reputation and was getting out of the business. So I was like, well, let me release this myself. And so basically put it out there, and I did pretty well self-distributing it. And then so I forget if other filmmakers reached out to me or if I reached out to them, but I was like, hey, I could take on your title too. Basically, that ended up being the end of the peak of the conversation. I guess you can say it's a bad way to phrase it. And then I would put out their stuff too, and some stuff would do well, and some stuff wouldn't do so well. But at least I had sort of established these connections by distributing City of the Vampires first, so I could follow up with I could be like, oh, you like City of the Vampires, did well with it. I have this other horror title, like Savage Harvest was an early one, and Darkest Soul was another one, which was originally called Grave Diggers, and
Sub Rosa, right?
that's when I was Salt City Home Video,
Oh, okay.
and then when I established an LLC for protection wise, that was Sub Rosa Studios, and stuff came out underneath that. And then eventually I did SRS Cinema, which was supposed to be like the elevated version of Sub Rosa, and I was trying to pick up these higher profile movies. I remember I picked up a movie called Highland Park Blues, which was a straight like romantic drama, and it was made like on 35 millimeter and a big budget, and they just did horrible. So eventually I just put everything under SRS Cinema and let Sub Rosa Studios, just go die and go quiet.
I fucking love terrible shark movies or like Walmart shark movies. Do you plan on doing any more in the future?
I would love to direct another one. I don't know what that'll be outside of House Shark sequel. Obviously, I'm producing a bunch, and we're on kind of a rush. It wasn't intended to have so many being done at the same time, but they were ideas that were sitting out there. And I finally had some opportunities to get them made. So we have like Last of Sharks, and we have Red Light District Shark Attack, and we have Nano Shark, and then there's even another shark movie that's coming. So as far as producing them, yeah, I would love to keep them going along. As far as directing myself, if I was do a sequel to House Shark, I would want to do it right. But I would, and people ask me for a sequel like every week, but I would want to do another feature or two before I would probably explore that anyways. So it was fun. I mean, I love doing it, and I'd love to continue the story. And I have a great idea for the sequel that I'd love to make. Which I don't want to reveal it. I don't want to steal it.
No,
but
I would love to be surprised. I would love to see it.
So one of your future projects is Mansplained. I did have one question I have to ask because my friend made me. Did you know that mansplaining is short for man explaining?
Oh, I have heard it. Sure, yeah.
That's what?
It's an ongoing joke at my work, and I was like,
oh, okay.
Did someone need clarification about the meaning there?
So I know you've done some work with Wild Eye, and one of my favorite things is to hate on them. But besides Tim Ritter, who surprisingly had a good experience, a lot of my other friends who went with them had bad ones. I was wondering what your experience was.
I haven't really worked with them direct. So they released the High 8 short.
Yeah.
The High 8 movie, which my short was on. I've never gotten any statements on it, but they're not responsible for the statements. The producer is. So in terms of dealing with them direct, like a license deal, I've not had. I have nothing to speak on. And I've had filmmakers talk to me about them, but I wouldn't want to say. Like I wouldn't want to speak for the filmmakers.
Yeah,
and say,
absolutely.
Whatever they said, if it was good or bad or whatever, that would be up to those filmmakers to come on the show.
And I've talked to 3 different directors from High 8. Like who was the one that was actually in charge of distribution? Just curious.
Oh, Brad Sykes was he was the overall producer.
Oh, Sykes was.
Brad and Tim were, but Brad kind of took it over.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Is there any things you want to do a shout out for future projects you're working on?
Sure, we're still financing Indiegogo, the Red Light District Shark Attack. Cagney Larkin is directing it. He's worked as the DP with Bobby Knipp, who did Woke, and he did he's doing Amityville Ripper right now for us. He's editing it. It's our first project with Cagney. I believe he's directed some shorts, but maybe his first feature. I know he's directed some shorts, but I'm not sure if he's directed a feature or not before. But we're excited to work for him. It's our first project with him, so hopefully, the fans will get behind that and support it. And then we just launched. We're doing like a soft launch. I usually do a soft launch for like 2-3 days, and then we announce it publicly. But I can announce it here. Another movie called The Front Rooms, which is inspired by like that liminal minimalist sort of horror movies. Or the shorts that you've seen like on YouTube and stuff like that. With Evan Jacobs, we're doing that, and I feel like he's like the perfect filmmaker to do that because he's already been shooting tons of minimalist like movies, horror and otherwise. So we have that one that's like in soft launch as I'm talking about it here. We'll be announcing it wide on Friday, and that's our next Indiegogo.
When are we going to see you in the director's chair again?
Well, I have been working on shorts. I did do a short called Pumpkin Spice that I made available only to my Patreon members, which is a very small group. I haven't really been promoting it really well.
I get that.
And there's another one I'm editing now that I just sent off to the musician called White Elephant that I'm real happy with. And that one, I'm going to try to do a Chicago premiere for, but again, it'll probably only be available to my Patreon for a while. They're both kind of proof of concepts. Pumpkin Spice came on more like a little bit of like a Halloween style fan film. So I'll probably do another segment for that character before I go out there and push it. And then I'm planning a couple more shorts for the fall. After House Shark, I was just super exhausted. It was so much work. I would do most of the crew stuff myself. I would have some crew people there, but not necessarily every day, and not necessarily skilled in that particular area I was having them help me on. So I'd have to constantly oversee it. After taking a break through the pandemic and after coming out of House Shark, I was just like, I need to up the scale of the stuff I'm doing personally, the movies I direct. So I'm trying to get bigger budgets. I'm trying to create a more modern sort of show reel with these shorts that I can show to prospective producers or studios and say, here's the level of filmmaking that I'm doing as a short. Help me raise, give me a budget, or I'll do my own Indiegogo eventually when I feel like it's at that point. So I can hire more talent. Like on White Elephant, I brought my nephew in to DP it so I could be off camera more. And it was a little weird. I kept grabbing the camera. I had to have like a day or two be like, even he was like, don't grab the camera. Like, yeah, I need to relax and sit back and direct. I wasn't used to doing it that way. So that was real helpful. So I could sit back and focus more on what was happening on set as opposed to what was just going on through like a little screen or well, we had a decent sized screen. But so once I feel like I said comfortable enough, maybe after doing a few shorts with settling into just that sort of director seat, then if I haven't gotten an outside producer, I'll do an Indiegogo and try to raise some decent money and shoot something bigger. I need to get like a solid DP on set, and I've been hiring sound guys, but I need to get some top notch sound guys, and I'm not doing all the catering and all that sort of stuff. Just get all those activities in capable people's hands and let them worry about it.
It takes a village.
Yeah, sure does. It does. And when you can afford them, then it's great. You can afford the village. That would be the goal.
The only other question I had I was curious if you were ever curious about remaking City of Vampires.
I actually have talked about it a few times. And at one point I was really interested in doing it because I kind of wanted to just go back to my roots and see what I would produce, back to my earliest days and see what I would produce nowadays compared to then. But I don't know, the idea just didn't catch a lot of fire with me. So there was other stories I wanted to tell. And if I did redo it, the story would change quite a bit. Well, maybe maintaining the basic essence of it. It would be a new story, but I don't know. I wasn't loving the new idea, and I wasn't loving the basic overall plot. I don't have a lot of interest in vampires right now, especially. So, but that could change. I mean, I always try to be open to anything. The right idea came along that got me excited.
Yeah, vampires just might blow up, and it's just a right time to kind of market it.
Yeah, of course. If something like that happened, then if I didn't remake it, maybe I would have one of these producers who work for me remake it. I'm usually pretty protective of my stuff. Who knows? Maybe I'll do a short version of it or something like that, someday too, and revisit it. So,
oh yeah,
cool.